ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to have with us today a very, very dear young friend who I've known for quite a while, who now has published a new book or is about to publish a new book, because you can get it autographed and it's not coming out for a while, and you can get an advance copy, I guess. You can order it in advance. Confessions of a Jewish Shiksa. Okay, so this already opens the door to a million discussions. My dear friend, Frannie Sheridan. Hey, Franny.
So privileged to be with you again, Avi Hoffman.
Well, thank you, Franny. Let me tell everybody a little bit, the few poor souls out there who don't know who you are, and there aren't that many because you are already becoming like a worldwide phenomenon. Let me give them a little bit of information, all right? Throughout her journey from trauma to nirvana, performer, writer, and cookie eater, Frannie Sheridan has been entertaining and educating audiences internationally for decades. Raised to believe that sharing the truth of her identity would get her killed, Franny ultimately journeyed out of the dark wormhole of PTSD into post-traumatic stress disorder, into PTJO, which is post-traumatic joy overload. And so using performance as a form of therapy on wheels, she's collected awards for all of her shows. She's been sought after by Hollywood luminaries. And Franny ultimately triumphed where many would have failed. She now, and I love this section, Franny, this is my favorite. Yes? She now unapologetically celebrates zany playfulness, boogie woogie, love intelligence, which I'd love to know what that is. Apparently I'm not that smart. And of course,
not smart enough.
Chocolate chip cookies during her popular live streams. Her silly and authentically intense persona inspires countless to free up whatever blocks their unique calling, and they don't have to lament what might have been. And she's written a new book called Confessions of a Jewish Shiksa, and you can get it on her website, FrannieSheridan.com, as well as her publisher, which is Mosaic Press. But now let's talk a little bit about this Mishigas, okay? Because I've known you long enough to know a little bit about your Mishigas. And so for those, as I said, who are not privileged to know your story, do you mind telling the audience a little bit about your childhood, your upbringing, and why you thought sharing the truth of your identity would get you killed?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on, Avi, my old, forever young friend. In a nutshell, both my parents are Jewish Holocaust survivors, as you well know, and my parents escaped the Holocaust by a freaking whisker after, going through all kinds of atrocities, like so many did. Their families were murdered and all of that. And anyway, just to fast forward, my father first escaped from Vienna, and he was a student of Sigmund Freud, as well as a medical student at the University of Vienna. He escaped over a bridge because he got a tip off from a friend who was posturing as a Nazi, that, he was on a list, one of the lists to be taken away by the Nazis. So my father, on his hands and knees, it was a very dramatic sharing that I got to hear these stories as a 9-year-old little girl. So you can imagine it was pretty dark as a child. I mean, I wasn't watching Walt Disney. So my father escaped on his hands and his knees in the middle of the night on a bridge that connected Austria to Switzerland. And fast forward, he ended up being hidden by a priest in Paris, joining the French resistance as a medic. And he was at the Battle of Dunkirk, where he, was trying to save infants, and, their mothers had just been murdered in front of them. They ran out of supplies, and my father, at one point just thought, what is the point? They're all coming down the beach. I'm going to be tortured and murdered. And he tried to drown himself in the English Channel. Uh, and, he was rescued by a British freighter who kept him in solitary for a few weeks. But I used to say as a little girl, like, but Daddy, wasn't that scary, being all alone and being captive? And he'd say, I had, clean sheets and I was safe. What else do you want? And so I think approximately 3 or 4 weeks later, they put him on one of the boats that came over to North America, and he ended up in Canada, in Montreal. Now, my mother was German Jewish. They did not know each other. She, her mother was murdered on Kristallnacht, and just to get to, where my parents finally met, eventually her family escaped. After going through horrors, like that we all know about, and ended up in Montreal, which is where my father was. And my father by then had joined the Canadian Army and he had become a captain. He, of course, had to do all of his medical training all over again because he didn't escape with papers. I mean, he had like, a couple little things in a knapsack and, on his hands and knees over the bridge. And one day she was walking in Montreal on Mount Royal, which is the mountain that's famous in Montreal, and they saw each other, and they were very enamored, and so that's how they met, and they began their life together as Orthodox Jews, proudly Jewish. My father's religion and identity was very much ensconced, very tied to his connection with his grandfather, who was a Hasidic rabbi, and my mother had been brought up Orthodox, and so that was, a big part rather of their reclamation of their having survived, and that despite the fact that they were so many of their family had been murdered because for being Jewish, they were able in Canada to proudly be Jewish. And so fast forward again, my father's first, after redoing his medical training all over again, his very first practice was in a very small town, which they didn't know at the time, was rife with Nazis who had come over. My father was Orthodox Jew. They were the only Jews in this little town called Morse, Saskatchewan. And in I don't remember the exact year, I don't remember, Avi, but my father was attacked and left for dead by a jealous doctor named Schmidt, who was a German, and his life was threatened. He was basically run out of town, and his post-traumatic stress disorder obviously was triggered. And so there was a court case that ensued. The doctor the doctor and the doctor's wife, actually, oddly enough, came into, beat my father into to try to kill him. And the doctor was fined $15 and his wife 10. And I have all of that information and all of the support material in my memoir. So just to validate that actually happened. But my father thought, what is the point of being Jewish if I'm going to lose my family this time in Canada? And you can understand, right? And it's not like he could go and, they couldn't shop for kosher food anywhere near. It was a very isolated little place, and they were alone. So he forced my proudly Jewish mother to convert. And my dad changed his name from Siegel, which was his familial name, to Sheridan, which is my name. And they converted, and they actually were converted by a bishop. By then, my parents had my 4 eldest siblings. My mother had given birth to her first 4. And so they remember, my eldest sisters are identical twins, and they actually remember when my mother was Orthodox Jewish and how my mother used the 2 soaps, one with a red dot and one with a blue dot for, milcha and for fleisch of meat and milk dishes. And they remember, they were very, very little, but they remember certain pieces of their life before and how they were converted by a bishop in a nearby city. A bishop, I know the whole thing is sort of unbelievable. But so again, fast forward, I was born in 1974. No, I'm kidding, 1961. And when I was born, you know, I was baptized. We went to, because by then my parents had converted, we went to Catholic church every week, you know, religiously. St. Basil's, my name is Frances Rose Mary Sheridan. So I was baptized and confirmed in the whole Megillah, and I didn't know any different. I went to St. Basil's Catholic school. You know, all my friends were Christian. We lived in a nice, you know, kind of upper middle class neighborhood in Ottawa, Canada. My father had totally relocated, and he was an eye surgeon, an ophthalmologist with two practices, well respected. You know, we were part of the fabric of society. And then one day when I was 9 years old, my dad said something that I remembered at the dinner table about, you know, being something Jewish. So I was like, Daddy, what's a Jewish? And he said, it's not Jewish. It's Jewish, and it's not. You know what he said was, it's a religion. It's it's it's. He clarified to me what it meant, and it was very foreboding, and it was very scary. And he really wanted me to listen to, you know, every nuance, that this was you know, a very, very important thing. It's what we were, it's what we are. And never ever tell anybody that you're Jewish. He made that clear to me from the beginning. So right away, you know, the hair on my arms stood up, and I knew something was wrong. But you're a little kid, like I didn't know exactly what, but that began this ritual that he had of telling me every day secret stories about the Holocaust. And he would come and wake me up in the middle of the night, not because he was trying to be abusive, but because he had post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm not defending him for doing this. I'm just saying this is how he dealt with it the best way he could.
Right,
And
and everybody dealt with it a different way. So okay, so now we understand why these are confessions of a Jewish shiksa, because you were Jewish, you just didn't know it, you were brought up as a Catholic. So, but I'm curious, in this town that you grew up in as a Catholic until you were 9, and through the years when he was telling you stories that you weren't allowed to share, because God forbid, if anybody knew you were Jewish, that would be a terrible thing and you could be killed, because that's what happened to Jewish people. But before you found out, were there any other families? I mean, your parents had an accent. They did, you know, I remember you telling me that they would, you know, do Jewish rituals, but hiding, you know, they would hide their Jewish rituals from you and others. Were there any other parents like that? I mean, was there
no, I mean,
anybody who spoke with a funny accent?
not that I remember. And the weird thing is, you know, having children of your own, kids acclimate. They kind of, you know, my parents had weird accents, but I just thought I knew they were European. That's
Right.
all I knew. So I thought they had this funny German and Viennese accent. And I actually talked with an accent when I was a little girl. And I thought it was normal, because I remember my teacher or my friends once sort of semi-mocking me because of it. And I just thought, that's how you say the word, whatever it was. You know, because kids, I didn't have anything to compare it to. So I was this little, you know, Franny Freud walking around a little bit like this, a little bit, because you just kind of assimilate to your parents' behaviors. I just thought. And now my mother, you know, as you know, Avi, like she would keep, you know, Manischewitz matzo ball mix, but she told me they were like, you know, it was for German dumpling soup and things. And we had matzo ball soup. Now I, you know, I didn't know then that that's what it's called, but on Fridays. And she had certain things that she did. But I, you know, when you're a little kid, it's not like there was a Holocaust sitcom on television or anything at that time to compare it to,
Hogan's Heroes was the closest thing you could get.
which my mother hated. She would cry through it. And of course, it's the funniest thing for us because we have the emotional distance, but it
Right.
was so raw with her. And plus, she wasn't allowed to be who she was. That was a big part of her identity, being Jewish.
So when you were growing up, Franny, you know, from your earliest recollections and until your teenage years, you know, your father ran away from the other town because of anti-Semitism. Do you remember any forms of anti-Semitism when you were growing up? I mean, was there anything that you can remember that was
Okay,
specific?
well, here's what I can say. Again, I didn't have the structure other than the nonstop stories my father would tell me, wake me up in the middle of the night and tell me repeatedly these stories. So that was my reference material. Like, I didn't know from anti-Semitism. I was a little girl, but what I do remember is my father having triggers where he would sometimes see people at the next table. Now, I don't know if this was just a PTSD trigger or if they did something. Look at those, like that Jewish man. I don't know. I don't know. I don't remember. But when I was a young woman, I did, experience some of that. I remember in different places on the subway when I lived in Toronto and different things like that, but not, not, you know, horrendous, if you can say that. It was existed certainly in conversation, and I heard a lot of it when I woke up to it. My father's experience, again, this town, Morse, Saskatchewan, there have been documentaries made about the number of Nazis, anti-Semites, etc., that lived there. Of course, they wouldn't have moved there if they knew it, even though it was my father's first medical practice there. They wouldn't have moved there if they knew that it was a hotbed of anti-Semites. But this has been highlighted in various pieces of footage. So that was part of the reality, and I guess part of their journey. I want to say, Avi, though, I regret. I'm my precious parents, who I feel very connected with. I don't regret my journey and the
Right.
contract, because it allowed me this rich fabric of a story, which I got to work with you many times and to share, and it seems to allow people to get it,
Well, that's actually a perfect segue to the next section. So here is this young woman. Okay, we're now going into your late, teens and early 20s. And obviously, there's a traumatic experience. When you say PTSD, in a way, I certainly understand it, because the scariest thing I ever had to do as a child was to wake up my father on the weekend. My father, no, my mother would say, "Go wake up your father," and I would
Right.
get so frightened that it
Oh,
would make me shake, because I knew that his nightmares of
I see.
Auschwitz were
Oh,
always there, and I would wake him up, and he would wake up screaming
oh,
and
geez.
look at me as if I were, some monster. And I was
Oh.
just a child. I was 5 or 6
I'm
years old.
sorry
So
for
I
that, but
understand the
I
traumatic
didn't
side of it.
know. I didn't know that you were gonna. I just thought it was because he got to sleep in like many husbands did on the weekend at that time. I see. Oh, that was
No, no,
something really
yeah.
daunting.
But, but so now you're in your late teens, your early 20s, and you have a story to tell. When did you start to realize that you could put your story into a dramatic form or a literary form? And tell us a little bit about the process of getting from childhood, and that trauma, to adulthood and this incredible transformation.
Well, I was stuck, Avi. I was stuck in terror, because when you're brought up, when you're raised with systematic terror, when you have to really, the thing is, I was told this not once, but every single night when I was a little girl. And all of a sudden, my, kind of multicolor, technicolor, Walt Disney-esque world became this very scary place. So I did not feel safe in my body. I did not think that the world was a safe place. It was a scary place. It didn't like people who were honest about who they were. And, I was told that repeatedly. So I majored in theater in university, State University of New York. I went there when I was 15. And I would do really well and be very lucid, and get a lot of press from my teachers and local papers and stuff about being this very young freshman and all this stuff. And then I would go into crippling anxiety, and this was a repeated pattern that I couldn't. Nobody understood, because it wasn't regular stage fright. It was entrenched. It was systemic, and I didn't tell anybody how I'd been raised. I was raised to tell that if I shared the truth of my identity, it wouldn't only get me killed, but my entire family. And my father still had huge control on me. By then, he had retired and was living in his native Vienna as a Catholic. So you see, the story was still alive and well in terms of how I should behave so that I didn't get everybody killed and be a good girl. And so because I had a lot of opportunities to work as an actor and do different things, because like I said, it was really flowing and fun and easy for me to be in the moment, because that's part of, I think, my DNA or something that my soul really wanted. But then I would go into this crippling stuff, and it was very, very frustrating. So I trained as a jazz ballet dancer. I trained as different arts, because I thought maybe it's just the wrong expression. Maybe I'll have more ability to express myself without this horrible thing coming that crippled me. It stopped me from connecting to my truth, to my expression. And so what I did ultimately is I was then living in Toronto in Canada, and I started going to Yuck Yucks, which is akin to the American improv chain. And I got a lot of attention from the club owner, who became a very good friend of mine, Mark Breslin, and he took his coach and his coach, and they worked with me because they saw this potential for me to be a lot more honest with the audience, he said, than most people who had been really young comics, which I was at that time. And again, it was so great, because for the first time, Avi, I gave voice to the fact that my parents were Jewish but raised me Catholic. He actually asked me backstage about my story, and the shtick did really well, until again, all of a sudden, I would think, I wouldn't even think it, because when you're so programmed, all of a sudden I was being very full of very self-revelatory. The audience was with me. I was not edited. And then all of a sudden I would have this, oh, I'm being exposed. I'm exposing my truth. And something in me was in terror. And I couldn't stop that pattern. And so he asked me about my past. And long story short, he said, listen, he asked me if I was Jewish. And he was the first person other than on stage doing my shtick, admitted that to. And he said, well, most comedians, most stand-ups are Jewish, and most comics need therapy. So he told me about Holocaust Center in Toronto. And, he said, you might want to check that out. He said, I'm here for you. You're doing, you got to, he was really supportive. And he said, just check it out and come back, and whatever, we'll work with you, blah, blah. And I said, I don't know. I mean, I was really watching my moolah as a young comedian, as an artist. And he said, well, there's something really good for young comics, and that's group therapy. It's okay. And so I started group therapy. It was cheaper. And I met children of survivors, which I am, which we are, and children of Nazis. Who were so full of incredible shame. The whole thing was incredibly healing. And I went to therapy for an extensive period of time, and I could have stayed there forever, but I would have just, cried the rest of my life away. It was a big, big deal for me to be there, and a real gift from Mark. And then fast forward again, I was living in Vancouver, and I had been touring as a comedian across Canada and doing that and doing pretty well. But again, the same old problem would come up periodically. Less, it bothered me. It bothered the dreck out of me. It bothered everything. So I decided that I had to do something about it and face my inner demons. And this inner voice, Avi, was saying, tell your story. But I was like, I am telling my story as a comedian. But I actually I don't know exactly I had a connection with my maternal grandmother, who had been murdered on Kristallnacht in Germany. And I felt compelled to tell the story. And like an idiot, I called my father, who, as I said, was retired, living in Vienna as a Catholic, undercover, right? And I told him what I wanted to do, and he threatened me with legal action. He said, you need somebody's signature. You can't do this. How dare you? Really. And it was difficult because I had been pummeled with this incredible guilt for so long. You understand. And so, you know, I had to do it. I felt like it was life and death. I really felt like if I didn't come clean with the truth of who I was, that I would be stuck forever, that something would be wrong with me forever. Now, I felt like something was deeply wrong with me, because why else would people want to kill me?
Yeah, I understand. So you wrote your first play? I
Yes,
mean,
my first,
was that the source of the first piece, and what did you
yes,
call it?
I ran it by other family members who weren't thrilled either, I have to say. But like I said, I was, so my first play was called The Waltonsteins, as you know, which, I, because it was based, it was a send up of the 70s sitcom The Waltons, right, which is about, a large Gentile family, and they were happy and they lived on a mountain, and we didn't and we weren't. So it was The Waltonsteins. And the first night I performed at Avi was in front of a tiny little 100-seat theater in Gastown in Vancouver. And I found a director, Jessica Vanderveen, who was fabulous. And we worked together, and I was terrified. And because I had been brought up to believe, I thought I would come on stage and get, be shot at by Nazis for being Jewish, for telling the story, for any of that. But I had a ethereal experience with my maternal grandmother while coming to the stage door from backstage. And she was so with me, and somehow just really empowered me, so that I stood on stage for over an hour telling this very rough rendition with cue cards, giant, like a giant, tent, a triangle, whatever you call that, a tented cue card. Um, and it flowed. I wasn't in fear. And afterwards, the audience wouldn't leave. They wouldn't leave. And they were so taken by the story. And they wanted to ask me questions. I left the stage and she asked me, she said they want to talk to you. And it was the most powerful experience I had as a performer. And somebody in the audience, how these things work, by magic, as if, wrote an article for the Jerusalem Report magazine, which, as you know, is published in Jerusalem and distributed internationally. And it as a result of that review and that story, it was read by a number of extended relatives that had lost track of my family when my parents converted to Catholicism and changed their family name and went underground, and have been searching for my family for over 40 years. And I started to get these very emotional phone calls from people, I was sitting on the Chesterfield reading my favorite magazine, the Jerusalem Report, and then they cry. And it was so moving to me. And one of those people was, the story, it just lived close to where I lived then in Vancouver, and had been the son of a family that had sponsored my mother's family to get out of Germany, because when you fled from the Holocaust, you had to have, as you know, a leaving visa and an entrance visa. And they actually had a farm in Saskatchewan. And my mother initially had connected with their family, but they lost track. So I was able to have a relationship with this extended relative of mine who lived close by, and I'd go over for Shabbos meals, and it was all very emotional. And my eldest sisters, came to Vancouver with a big reunion, and they went to see this extended relative. Maisie and Esther were their names, and they hadn't seen these people since they were little kids. So it was enormously healing.
So tell me first of all, how many times did you perform your one woman piece, and how many different names did it have? Because I remember the Waltonsteins,
Right.
but after that it evolved into several different, evolutions.
Right.
Now
Well,
basically it's become a book. And
right.
so
Correct.
tell
Correct.
us a
Well,
little bit about that evolution. You've
sure.
done the show all over the world. Are you still doing it?
No. Okay. So I mean, I performed it like 7,432 to the pi of who knows how many cherry pie times. It was a Waltonsteins. It got published as the Waltonsteins. I co-authored it and brought it to the next level with Linda Goldar Smith, and we brought in a musician, and it became a bigger show than it was. Um, the thing is, Avi, I felt I had created this, like, it's interesting, it was a real dichotomy, it was a real duality, because I created this freedom of expression vehicle, but I also felt like I had imprisoned myself in telling it a certain way. There was a real box around it. So I was driven, I was compelled to add more of the truth of who I was into the play. And every time I did, I changed the name. I didn't change my religion, but I changed my name, the name rather of the play. And it was called at one point, because as I said, my father had studied under, Sigmund Freud, and actually had a lifelong friendship with Anna Freud, his daughter. And I cover that in my memoir. But so one rendition of the play was called My Freudian Slip. I don't remember all of the others, but another was called
Dancing. I remember Dancing on Hitler's Grave.
Dancing on Hitler's Grave, right?
Right? That was one version.
Right. And that had to do more with dancing. And isn't that the one? Is that when we worked together? You directed me?
No. I was with the Waltonsteins.
You were with the Waltonsteins. And you, Avi Hoffman, producer extraordinaire, director, actor, booked me all over the States too. You booked me in Atlanta, all over.
Yeah,
I can't remember, Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And we met in Vancouver when you were performing.
That's right. At the Chutzpah Festival. That's right.
The Chutzpah Festival, the Norman Rossi Theater, where I performed a lot too. Oh, that's so fun.
So how did this evolve into a book?
Well, fast forward, I had the incredible privilege of, I received a lot of press, a 9-page feature article, which was written in the Ottawa Citizen, which is a national Canadian paper. And as a result of that, Shelley Page, who's this unbelievable journalist, she actually wrote the foreword in my memoir. It attracted Arthur Hiller, legendary film director of Love Story and about 65 schmillion quadrillion movies, and who was the what do you call it? The president of the what is it? Academy for, I haven't thought of the name for a long time, Sciences, and what is it? He was the head of Hollywood, darling.
Right, the Academy of Arts and Sciences. Yeah.
Thank you. For many years, he was the little guy who would come out and announce the Academy Awards, the Oscars, with all the hair. And he used to often say, "I'm more famous for my hair than I am my movies." Very humble, lovely guy. And so he had read in the article that I'd written a multicast feature film screenplay. Contacted me. I thought it was a joke, Avi. I thought the whole thing was a joke. But he had his assistant call me, and then he got on the phone and he asked to read my script, so I was like, well, let me think about it. Okay, Mr. Hiller. I sent it to him immediately. He read it, and then I was performing in Ottawa, my hometown. I will just say this. In a 900-seat, incredible, beautiful theater at the Museum of Civilization. And my family had flown in for the first time ever to see me. And you have to realize some of these family members wanted to sue me and not out of any malice. When you're brought up with that form of terror, they wanted to protect their little sister, what was I doing now after all this conditioning and going to go against my father and the family and maybe get us killed, So it sounds irrational, but it's rational and irrational when you've been programmed so much with this fear. So anyway, there they were. And I met nieces and nephews for the first time because we were really separated as a result of all this terror in the family. It wasn't just about being Jewish. It was terror of life. And Arthur Hiller flew in to surprise me. I'd never met him. And during the Q&A, somebody announced him. The whole audience, gasped because he was a pretty famous dude. And they threw this big party, and it was so exciting for a little schmagegi like me, to be with this guy. We worked together for 12 years, and he attached himself to direct the film. And so that really changed the trajectory of my life. And that's how I ended up in the States. I had many beloved people who I feel so, so appreciative, like yourself, write letters, and I got an O1 actor-writer visa. I was able to work in the States doing my play, which I then changed the title to Confessions of a Jewish Shiksa. Now, that is also the name of my memoir. And I worked with a few different people, but one of them was Shari, whose name I couldn't pronounce because of my Canadian upbringing. So I always called her Apple because that's how you say Shah in Shari. Anyway, very important, significant point. So we worked together and we did the show all over, including most recently, which was several years ago now, at the Kravis Center in West Palm Beach. And it was more of a character-driven show because I wanted to bring out more of the humor, but of course you cannot, and nor would I want to, dilute the heart and soul and the sadness and the darkness and the trauma in this story to get a laugh. However, we played with the characters, and that really that was like the little girl in me and the little boy in you that never dies, as we know, that we need to allow to celebrate, to allow back in. My voice was really squashed as a kid, like many of our voices were, and so to allow in more joy really is the name of the game for me. And just to answer your question, no, I'm not performing that anymore. I taught a myriad of workshops, to people who had PTSD, and from vets to you name it, to different people. And of course, right now, what's going on in the world, it's very relevant. And I worked as a speaker a lot, and I also went back to doing shtick, stand up for a while, and now, my live streams are absolutely silly. Like, I basically, because people want to get out of their head now. I do. There's so much going on. We can be in terror, we can feel good, but there's a lot of dark energy around and things that are scary. Yeah. And so people want to, be in joy, not in artifice, not by submerging the truth of the art, but dance and movement is a great way. So what I do is I have these love streams that I call live streams, which I started, a few years ago, at the beginning of, Shmorona. And people dance with me, and I just sort of, I don't want to use the word channel because it just sounds so woo, but I just let any kind of, connecting to the truth and the love that we are, love intelligence you asked about. To me, love intelligence is what we are, regardless of whether you're Jewish, Catholic, Muslim, Buddhist, a Girl Guide, a Canadian, you know what I mean, a Sagittarius. We are without, as what I feel in the soul of my soul is that without these meat suits, without these, these bodies that we have, we're love intelligence and we're eternal. And that's my belief. And it's a real privilege for me to do this and connect with people, and people are hungry for it. So as far as performance, that's what I'm doing. And then as far as the book, should I just keep going, or do you want to get a word in edgewise?
No, please. You're doing great. I was going to go away. You don't need me. You do your own show.
You. No, don't go away. I'll go through separation. I have hissy fits. I have in my live streams, I have hissy fits because I have separation anxiety. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but certainly what you're doing is an idea whose time has come. Love intelligence, as I understand, if I understand what you're talking about.
Well, you're intelligent enough to.
Well, I'm not so sure, but but the bottom line is we are living in an age of gender acceptance and gender identity and LGBTQI and all these, wonderful associations that are now being accepted without question, and that's a good thing. So yeah, I'm all for love intelligence, and I'm all for love, because God knows it's hell of a lot better than being afraid to be killed if you tell people you're Jewish.
Or anything.
Right, or about anything. Yes, the paranoia and the fear, and there's plenty of it out there, especially in the age of, as you say, Shmorona. The idea that there's a lot of bad stuff out there, and we need to find the joy in our lives.
Yes.
Which brings us to Confessions of a Jewish Shiksa, the book.
These segues are so seamless.
I'm assuming that if people read your book, not only will they learn about the horrible, tragic elements of the life you've told us about, but they're also going to learn about the joyous, love streams that you've
Well,
come up with.
Well, here's the thing. It took me a while to write the book, which I started writing in Ottawa, actually, I think in 1997, or not Ottawa, Vancouver. But that it's neither here nor there. My point is, for me, Avi, I've had the privilege, like I'm sure, like yourself, of reading many deeply profound, important, moving autobiographies and biographies. And I have read many, and then touring, people gave me many to read. All of them have helped me to feel not alone, to feel somebody else has gone through their journey, and and it was always inspiring. When I got to the point where I was ready to really get serious about my memoir, I decided I wanted to write a book that I wanted to read. And for me at that point, I wanted to weave in humor and sauciness and juiciness and irreverence and the truth of myself without shame, because we've all had journeys, and many people hide a lot of what they've been through, and that's fine. And as you know, being a memoirist doesn't mean I have to tell people that I have, mold on my toenail. If I did, I'm just saying, if you don't have to divulge all of the gross kind of, but because sometimes people think that's what it means. But I wanted to share that I didn't have such an orthodox journey out of inherited post-traumatic stress disorder into being the mostly joy-filled person, because I had a lot of demons, like many of us do. And I wanted to inspire people that it didn't matter where they were in their journey, and it didn't matter what they did in their life, that there was a way to navigate out of it. So yes, I have a lot of what I decided to do was weave in some of my shtick, some of my stand up. I was, did a lot of club work and different things like that. And so the scenes of the darkness of my parents sharing and my experience as a little girl in that family. And my parents were not happy at this point. My mother wanted to be who she was. My father, the more he hid who he was, he became toxic to himself and everyone else. Not a happy camper, terrified of the world and projecting it outward. And so I've woven in scenes of stand-up, and also this very nice, well-behaved Catholic Jewish girl worked as, are you ready? Are you sitting? As a stripper for 6 weeks. Yeah, me, as an undercover stripper. Now, the only way that I would have ever worked as a stripper.
Isn't that an oxymoron, undercover stripper?
Well, I had to be. It's total oxymoron, especially in my case, with my coming out and being who I really am. But the reason, by the way, I was undercover was because, many people in the entertainment business go to strip clubs, I was told. And at that time, I had a fair bit of visibility as a, somewhat well-known playwright and actor doing the Waltonsteins. I got a ton of press, as I said, in Canada. And so, and, in the States as well. And so, my, and I write about this in my memoir, my director and co-writer at that time, Lynna Goldar Smith, because I wanted to raise money. I had an opportunity to work with, a well-known off-Broadway director in New York, and I had to raise some money. And I was getting a lot of traction with the play, and I got some grants and some philanthropy, but not enough. And I didn't feel like going back to a little, day job doing something that would make me feel like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to perform, but my anxiety still haunted me, even though I'd done the Waltonsteins. Not all the time, but it was still there. So I felt like I needed to keep performing. As you know, I've said it's therapy on wheels. So Lynna Goldar Smith, who was directing my play at that time, I told her, I said, I know this sounds insane, but I'm thinking, like, what if I worked as a stripper? I could wear a wig and have a persona, be like an acting job, but I've never even been to a strip club. And she said, she basically told me, you come from the right side of the tracks. I don't. and you're going to be okay. You know who you really are. You'll make a bucket of cash, she said to me, and don't have to do it for long. And it might be, you know, a really interesting thing. So she gave me the courage to actually go and walk into a strip club for the first time ever, which I did, terrified, with a wig and all that. And I basically used my dance training and my wacky humor, which I've woven into scenes in the memoir. I brought props on. I did stuff that, you know, the strip club,
I'm not sure we want to know all the details.
but it
Um,
very silly stuff. I mean, it
right,
was
right.
ridiculous. I was essentially mocking the audience, and many times they didn't get it. I mean, I had like, bizarre, crazy things like a cow udder. You know what I mean? Nothing that was kind of clinically sexy at all, because that wasn't why I was doing it. I was doing it because I wanted to perform with humor and craziness, and I love, it was like Carol Burnett, The Late Show or something. I don't even, but I had as much fun with it as I could. And it freaked the heck out of a lot of people, but a lot of people liked it. And they told me, we've never seen anything like this, because I was not just, as I say in the book, I taught stress management, so people could be helped with their PTSD. But to manage my stress, I had to take off my clothes. And that's what I did.
Right. And all of this is in the book. So it's great. So the book is actually being released publicly on October 28th. But
Yes.
apparently, if people go to your website, FrannieSheridan.com, they can actually order an autographed hard copy in advance. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. You're such a good promoter. Yeah, there's a contact form on my website. So people contact me. I should have it, says my publisher, in about 3 weeks. And, Howard Astor at Mosaic, they're great. They've been around for over 40 years, international distributed, Sharjah. I'd never even heard of Sharjah. It's near Dubai. They have like different book fairs all over the world. Yeah, he's publicly releasing it October 28th, but exactly what you said. If people want an autographed copy, they can contact me. And so the book is juicy. It's not just a story, a powerful story about my incredible parents' journey, historic journey as Jewish Holocaust survivors, and how they survived and what we went through as a family. But it's juicy. It's about my journey. It's silly. It's funny. It's about my journey as a stand-up comedian. And if you don't like the book, I'm going to enclose some seasoning in the book cover, so you can just sprinkle it on and eat it, because we're Jewish and we like to eat.
So, but they can also go to Mosaic Press, and apparently there's an early bird special for 30% off.
Well, it's
For
Florida.
those who don't want to pay for the autograph. Great. Listen, Franny, to me, it sounds like this is going to be, or could be, a great film. Once the book comes out, I suspect you should be talking to all the Hollywood hotshots and get them to want to make a movie out of it.
Well, as they say, from your mouth. I will say that Howard, my publisher, they have big Toronto Pitch Fest before Shmorona, and there's significant interest apparently from 2 production companies. And I want to just say, Arthur Hiller developed macular degeneration. And the nerve, he got old. So that's why the film never came to fruition, but everything at the right time. And I will say, I wrote it a while ago. You know how these things take time, right, Avi? So
Sure.
it's just so soul warming, because my reviews are incredible. It's like I feel like I'm paying people literally to write these. So I'm just glad that people are getting it and it's resonating. And I want to say, I wove in these different points of view, and many well-known, teachers and writers said, don't do it. You can't do that with a memoir. I went with my intuition. I just want to encourage people to listen to their voice. Yes, of course, you want to get a technical prowess, but if you feel that you have an intuition, an inner calling, an inner voice to create something, we're all geniuses. We all have unique geniuses, and the whole thing is about allowing in the expansion of creation. And that's something that it took me a long time to give myself permission to do. But I think the book allows that for people. It encourages that too, because it's a different format of a memoir. And I just love you. Thank you so much,
Of
Avi.
course. What I also find interesting is you had mentioned Kristallnacht,
Yes.
and how your family was affected. You're coming out with the book October 28th, just in time for November 9th anniversary of Kristallnacht. And our organization, Why I Love Jewish, will be doing a full day of events for Kristallnacht. We do it every year. Because I think it's really important for you and me and all of the people who care to really never forget, always remember. I like never forget has become so cliche at this point.
Yes.
But I think we should always remember, or remember forever. Either way, you are unforgettable. Um,
Oh,
you will be remembered forever for your work, for the important message you have, and the love that you're sharing with everybody. So, ladies and gentlemen, whoever's watching, please go to FrannieSheridan.com, go to Mosaic Press, come to whyilovejewish.org, and celebrate the lives of really great people doing great things. Franny, anything we can ever do to help you, we're always here for you.
oh, bless you forever, Avi Hoff. And I love that you're doing that on Kristallnacht. I'd be honored. And and it's Franny, Frannie, just so people know.
Right.
Yeah, not
Right.
Fanny,
Not
the
Fanny.
F-A, although, very proud of my tuchus.
Well, chocolate chip cookies will do that. So, yeah. Good. Well,
Yes.
thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Frannie Sheridan.
Love you. Thank you so much. Always a privilege, Avi. Lots of love.